By the time Fire Emblem Gaiden was released, the Super Famicom had already been on the market for 2 years. It's no surprise then that the next Fire Emblem would be released on the Super Famicom. Everything had to be bigger, better, and bolder. A Super Fire Emblem. Okay, it was called Fire Emblem Mansho no Nazo, or Mystery of the Emblem, but it might as well be called Super Fire Emblem. Instead of just making a game with better graphics and sound, you were given 2 Fire Emblems for the price of one. One is a remake of the first game, the other is a direct sequel. Both of them are available to play right from the start. There would never be another game released quite like this. Part 1 of the game, also known as Book 1, is a retelling of Marth's first journey to reclaim his kingdom and liberate the continent from Medius. The gameplay was updated and the story was fleshed out some more. This remake did drop 5 characters, 5 maps, and 1 class, but these are really minor things. You'll still get around 30 hours out of Book 1. Don't forget you still have the sequel to play through, and that game's even longer. The changes and tweaks are shared by both games, so while Book 1 is the older game, it plays exactly the same as Book 2. What changes that have been made aren't as drastic as Fire Emblem Gaiden, but they are welcomed additions that streamline the gameplay for the better. Things like being able to see just how far any unit can move is a huge convenience. No more checking every class's stats and counting exactly how many squares they can move. Just the simple press of a button and you'll be able to see exactly what you need. It made planning your strategies so much more efficient. Know yourself and know your enemies. This is one of the most basic rules of strategy, and Mystery of the Emblem gives you more information than before. Want to know the terrain information? All you have to do is put your cursor over the map and look at the corner of the screen. You couldn't see your terrain information in the first game unless you're physically in a battle, and even then you only see it flash by briefly. Want to know each weapon's stats? You can now see them with a quick press of a button. You can even check out the stats of the weapons before you buy them. There was absolutely no way to see the weapon stats in the first game, since weapons in Fire Emblem all have their own pros and cons. Being able to see them just saves you the headache of slowly calculating it from your stats. They even tweaked the battle scenes and removed the clunky bars that indicates your attack, accuracy, and defense. No more staring at the bars and trying to figure out exactly how much damage you can do. One of the things I didn't mention in the first retrospective is that damage calculation in Fire Emblem is very rigid. Bearing any issues with your character's accuracy and critical rate, you know exactly how much damage you would do and take in a fight. If the enemy has 5 points in defense and you have 10 points of attack, then you'll be doing 5 HP of damage to him no matter what. Changing the bars to numbers just makes things so much more convenient. Whereas in the first game, you couldn't even tell how much power your weapon added to your overall attack. Although you still have to count the squares to figure out the HP instead of a numeric value in combat scenes, so there's still room for improvement. They may not sound very big, but these additions and refinements help further evolve the series. It's really hard to go back to playing the Famicom games without these features. One of the biggest additions is the ability to dismount from your horse. Whenever you enter a battle indoors, all mounted units must dismount from their steed. This really changes the dynamic of some battles, especially for the remake. Whatever strategy you came up with in the original might not work as well now that all units have the same movement. Clever players can also use this function to help units get close and bypass dangerous enemies, like dismounting from your Pegasus to get near an archer. While it's true that Mystery of the Emblem is better at giving the players as much information as possible, one new feature was hidden from the player. For whatever reason, the in-game dialogue never mentioned it, nor is it documented in the instruction manual. It was the support function. Support was both a gameplay feature and a subtle plot device. Some characters can give each other a bonus to accuracy, avoid, and critical rate when they stand within 3 squares of each other. These bonuses are only given to lovers, siblings, or good friends. Some of these character connections aren't mentioned in the game, although you should be able to figure out most of them on your own. Marth and Keita are lovers, so it's no surprise that they support each other mutually. Then there are obscure ones like Katria getting support bonus by being next to Marth, but not vice versa. This is a hint that Katria is secretly in love with Marth, but Marth doesn't know it because he already loves Keita. This gave you an extra strategy to think about when picking your units for battle, and it also added more to the characters. Support conversations wouldn't evolve until later. As I said before, this game contains a remake of the original, so I won't get too deeply into that story. But here's a really abridged recap of the first game. Evil Dragon comes back, conquers most of the continent, Marth runs, Marth grows up, Marth fights back, continent liberated from Evil Dragon. The sequel, or Book 2, picks up a few years after the first game. Once again, the story centers on Marth, this time against a former friend and ally who's turned evil. After the defeat of Medius, all the nations are in the midst of rebuilding, when suddenly, Emperor Harden of Achaea requests for Marth's aid in settling a rebellion in Grust. Soon, Marth discovers that the people were rebelling because of Harden's tyrannical rule. All this turns out to be a trap to lure Marth away from his kingdom. Knowing that once he discovers the truth, Marth would disobey orders, giving Harden an excuse to attack his homeland and label Marth a traitor. Oh, just to be clear, Achaea is both the name of the continent and the name of the most powerful kingdom. You know, kinda like having New York City in New York State. Adding greater overall impact to the game's story is the villain, Harden. Harden wasn't just some brand new villain from out of nowhere. He was previously one of your party members from the first game, and he joined you early on in your quest. He was a useful character too, I might add. This makes Harden's fall from grace more shocking and poignant. Unlike a lot of characters, Harden was given some character traits early on. Harden was a hero who once liberated the slaves, and had a strong sense of justice. The spoilers starts now! After the war, Princess Nina was urged to pick a husband to be the king in order to rebuild Achaea. Her only choices were Marth and Harden. Since Princess Nina and Keita were good friends, she didn't want to hurt Keita's feelings, so Harden was chosen over Marth. Harden was overjoyed since he loved Nina. What he didn't know was that the only one in Nina's heart was Camus. She tried to hide this from him, but eventually Harden found out. This revelation broke his heart. Harden locked himself in the room and wouldn't see anyone. In his despair, Garneth reappeared disguised as a merchant and gave him the Dark Orb. This Dark Orb that kept Garneth alive consumed Harden's weakened soul and changed him into an evil man. And not just Harden, you'll also be fighting many characters who joined you in the previous quest. This really adds more impact to the story of a fallen hero. You get all of this and learn more about the wars of the past and how they intertwine with the present, the scheme to resurrect an old enemy, and why the Fire Emblem was created. The Fire Emblem is the same as the previous game, but it was incomplete. Originally, it was created by the Divine Dragon King Narga to seal away the Mad Earth Dragons. On the emblem are 5 orbs that contain immense power. They are the true power of the Fire Emblem. After saving humanity, Narga hid the emblem in a temple, but it was later stolen by a thief. He removed the orbs from the emblem and sold them for money. That thief would later found the Holy Kingdom of Achaea, and kept the emblem as his royal family's sacred treasure. What he didn't know was that removing the orbs would bring disaster. Without them, it was nothing more than a shield. When it's restored, it would put the Earth Dragons back to sleep, and also prevent other dragons from losing their mind. Mystery of the Emblem added more to the original story, and used it to build up to this grand finale for the Achaean saga. From this point on, Fire Emblem would spend 2 games focusing on one continent before starting anew. The games would jump forward, go backwards, or even tell stories in between. In our next episode, we'll be covering a Fire Emblem that makes just as many drastic changes as Fire Emblem Gaiden, and yet it somehow manages to stick to the formula closer than Gaiden. This game was also beloved by many Fire Emblem importers, and a popular favorite among many Japanese players.